Go ahead and kick off our next presentation this afternoon. Our next presenter is Elliot. The mentor is Adam McCormick, and the title of the presentation is Caring for LGBTQ Youth, Enhancing the Experiences of Foster Parents. And I am going to make sure Elliot is all set up here to share their screen.
I won't need to share things. Oh, good.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm just gonna talk.
Excellent. Well, I'm gonna try and spotlight you, and then there you go. I'm gonna turn it over to Elliot.
Okay, awesome. So I do have a little kid here, so if you hear any weird noises, don't worry about it. They're just watching TV. But to jump into my thesis, basically the focus is on sort of our Texas foster care system, because as it stands right now, most people pretty much know they don't have the best reputation at all. Right now, there are about 30,000 children in foster care in Texas at any given time. And when you look into the research, we have a 2019 study that says about 30% of these foster youth identify as LGBTQ. And if you do the math on that, that means we're looking at about over 9,000 LGBTQ youth who are currently living in our foster care system. And unfortunate reality of that is that the system does not treat them well. We have research that says not only are LGBTQ youth overrepresented in the foster care system, but they are also disproportionately abused and mistreated. We have examples of this all over. The Texas House Bill 3859, which allowed foster parents and adoptive parents to discriminate against basically their foster children if they were being, I guess, religiously discriminated against, which allowed them to send their kid to conversion therapy or, just provide a very non-affirming home for them. And you also have examples of US district judges calling it a fundamentally broken system. So it's well versed that this is a massive problem in Texas that a lot of people have focused on trying to fix. But when you look into where people are targeting their interventions, there seem to be two main categories. You get people who are doing research onto or into the agencies themselves, which is very helpful. And you also have people who are looking into individuals who have aged out of foster care and are LGBTQ, or individuals who are currently in foster care and are LGBTQ, which is super great to get these perspectives. But I really felt that there was a really important one that was missing, which was the foster parents, And I think this is important to look into because these are the people that these kids are going to be spending the most time with. When you're in the foster care system, you rely really heavily on your foster parents. And not only that, but for LGBTQ kids, they could be in the foster care system specifically because they were rejected by their biological parents around their sexuality or their gender orientation. So these are people who have a profound amount of responsibility and trust and vulnerability with these kids. And so I was pretty amazed that nobody had looked into what sort of training are these people receiving, what are they doing to help provide affirming care to their children. There was really nothing about it. So what Adam and I decided was to go out and interview foster parents in Texas. We reached out to foster parents from the Texas chapter of the National Foster Parent Association, and I drew up a list of questions kind of just to get their insight about what was their experience being a foster parent to an LGBTQ child. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the amount that I was hoping to reach out to just due to the pandemic, but I was able to get a good number of interviews completed, and the results were pretty, almost you could say, common sense, but you need the research out there to be able to, institute policy changes. And so what we pretty much found was that most foster parents are not receiving any sort of LGBTQ specific training, either when they become a foster parent or they express to the agency that they are fostering an LGBTQ child. So at no point is training being offered for them, which later on I'll talk about how that's a really big issue. Of the people I interviewed, only one parent said that they had received any sort of LGBTQ specific training, but they did mention that that was incredibly helpful for them when their child came out to them and they had to navigate that sort of conversation. Another thing that came up quite often was the animosity and backlash that a lot of parents received from their agencies when they provided affirming care to their foster child. I had a woman tell me that when she would go and attend foster parent groups with her child, the other parents would not acknowledge them. They would be totally ostracized from the activities. So they had to completely stop attending. They tried to cut off as much ties they had with the organization as possible, and they had to go to outside sources to be able to provide, an affirming environment for their foster child. And we see this again and again, where because agencies are so privatized, you really do have the religious discrimination come in. And luckily, the people I spoke to generally were really great about going out there and getting these resources on behalf of their foster children. But there are so many parents who either are not knowledgeable on the subject at all, so they don't even know where to begin, or they may have their own preconceived notions, biases, and discrimination, and they're going to put that onto the child if they're not receiving any sort of corrective training. So there are a lot of children who are unfortunately going to be receiving less than ideal care because the agencies are doing nothing to prepare these foster parents. Not only that, but even if you do have foster parents who are doing great things for their child, putting them in groups of their peers and demonstrating, proper affirming care, this is not going to continue on to other foster parents because it's going to end with them. They're not going to be able to share that with the organization, who will in turn share it with any prospective parents. It's pretty much each person's doing their own thing, and there's no cohesive organization. So with all that doom and gloom, I did ask them a bunch of questions about what it was like navigating this relationship with their foster child. What did they learn from it? What would they recommend for future foster parents? And they pretty much came up with the same sort of themes in each conversation I had. And the number one being no double standards. They really wanted to emphasize that their LGBTQ child was no different from any of their other foster children. That also influenced like where they were sleeping, what activities they were doing, anything of the sort. If it was going to be the same for one child, it was going to be the same for another. A woman I spoke with had the example of when she got her LGBTQ child, I believe she identified as pansexual, the agency told her, oh, you need to keep her in a separate room from the other girls because we don't know what they could be up to. And she had to stand up and be like, no, I'm not going to do that. You wouldn't do that for this child in any other sort of situation. It's no different just because she identifies as pansexual. She's going to be treated the same way as I'm treating my other kids. So she really had to stand up to her agency and say, like, what you're doing is not okay, and it's not going to be happening in my house. This child is not going to be ostracized just because of her sexuality, which was really great that that parent did that. But again, that could be happening in so many other homes, and the parents are going to say, okay, yeah, I will move them. So no double standards was super important to stress. They also stressed the importance of just providing a general sense of stability and comfort for the child. The only reason you really ever find out that your foster child is a member of the LGBTQ community is when they feel comfortable enough to come out and tell you. So if they're not going to feel comfortable in their relationship with you, they're never going to let you know. So to these parents, it was really important that there was trust in their relationship, there was openness, and they had a really secure bond. And as part of that, again, you have not putting any judgment on them. When they told me about their coming out stories that their child gave to them, they all pretty much emphasized, I made sure they knew right away that there was nothing wrong with this and that we loved and respected them and that would be okay. And they also made sure to go through and provide actionable changes to that. So for a family that was religious and their church was no longer being accepting of this child, they switched churches. So not only was that the environment that was surrounding these children, the foster parents basically put their money where their mouth is, and they made the changes that needed to be changed. And finally, the one thing that I thought was really important that all of the foster parents mentioned was just they emphasized the uniqueness of their child and the individuality. They really just reiterated that, of course, their child was no different from any other child's, but they were special and they had amazing characteristics. They were amazing people. And you really got the sense that they just genuinely loved the foster children they were caring for, and that their sexuality didn't come into play into how they would treat them with respect or love. And they just really emphasized, how important it is to build that unique relationship. A lot of the times people get stuck in the, foster parent, foster child, they're power differential, one's the parent, one's the child, but really it's about building a relationship with them, just person to person. And so that was definitely stressed a lot in these interviews that I did. So basically, taking all this information into consideration, I came up with essentially some recommendations that I'm hoping to suggest to some foster agencies. First and foremost, they need to be doing these trainings. So many of the foster parents I interviewed said, please tell them that what we need are these trainings, because without them, again, so many parents are going to slip through the cracks, and then so many kids are going to slip through the cracks. I had one parent that I interviewed when her child came out to her. She didn't even know what pansexual meant. She had to go and Google it, which is great that she went out and took the onus on herself to learn about her child's sexuality. But these parents should already be well versed. There are plenty of specific trainings in regards to children with medical needs, children who have certain disabilities. So it should be no different for sexuality. We should have this in place, because even if you're like, oh, well, I just won't adopt or I just won't foster LGBTQ children, you never know. Anybody could be LGBTQ. They don't come with a big sign on their forehead, So I think that this is definitely something that agencies need to adopt across the board. You can't pick and choose who you're giving this training to. It needs to be something that's given to all foster parents, because as it stands right now, that's not something that's really happening. Luckily, we have agencies who are providing this training for staff, which is super important. But again, if you're not providing it for the parents who are with these kids almost 24/7, you're neglecting a huge area of their life where they're going to be affected by this person. So that pretty much wraps up what I went through for my research. Hopefully we can get this changed and Texas can be a little bit better with how they deal with LGBTQ children in foster care.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Elliot. We're going to turn things over to your advisor quickly here. Dr. McCormick, if you'd like to say a few words. And while that's happening, please remember, send questions via the chat and we'll get Elliot to answer those before we end our time together.
Thanks so much. Elliot, you did a great job. And that surprises no one, I'm sure. This is such a critical study, and for years, people in this field, people in this area who have done research with LGBTQ youth in the foster care system have said we have to have a more formal way of hearing from foster parents. We've heard from a long time, kind of anecdotally, foster parents saying we don't have the training, we don't know what we're doing here, we don't have best practices to rely upon. And I think Elliot's study, when it's finished, is going to be something that can really help to inform some of those conversations and some of those trainings. And I will add that Elliot was rocking and rolling on this study up until mid-March when the pandemic hit, and still plans to complete the study when things get back to normal. Foster parents, as you can imagine, don't have a lot of time on their hands these days to conduct hour or 2 hour long interviews. So I think it's important to note that she plans to finish this sometime soon, and it will be a really important study. And we have the entire social work faculty here, and I think I can speak for all of us when I say we are very proud of you, Elliot, not just for this project, but for the many things that you have done for populations on the margins to address issues of social justice and economic justice and gender justice and racial justice and all of those things in the time that you've been at St. Ed. So it's been a joy and a privilege to work with you, and we're really proud of you.
Excellent. All right, I hope you're ready, Elliot. We have a queue already.
Yes.
All right, we're going to take them in the order they came in. The first question asks, does the LGBTQ training that foster parents can receive include information on how to navigate school life, especially gender and sexuality-based bullying of their foster children?
So as it stands right now, a lot of agencies obviously just aren't giving any training in general. But that is a pretty important topic. I mean, that is where children are spending a lot of their time, and obviously backlash that they're experiencing due to bullying is something that happens due to gender and sexuality. I would love for that to be included, but I imagine that's going to be pretty difficult to integrate, unfortunately.
So I'm going to do this one out of order because I think it's related to what you were just saying. What did the foster parents want or need from their LGBT plus training?
So basically, I think where we're at right now is we need just like fundamental training. You have foster parents who aren't even really familiar with what it means to be LGBTQ and what falls, like the pansexual example. So just like basic terminology is something that's really needed right now. And then as we do that, we can get more complex into, you know, again, like the bullying at school. And, you know, I think most important to focus on is how to provide affirming care, because that's really what's going to influence whether or not these children are going to be more at risk for suicide, self-harm, substance abuse. That is, I think, the most critical point that we emphasize is we need to support these children, because if we don't, it's going to have huge ramifications for their health.
And another sort of related question would be, as I recall, the training for fostering is 30 hours. How much extra time do you envision LGBTQ plus training adding to this?
I honestly don't think it would be that much. I mean, depending on the depth that these agencies wanted to go into, I could see it spanning anywhere from like 1 to 3 hours, which when you consider the effects it's going to have on the child, in my opinion, it's totally worth it.
Great. Okay. They're rolling in still here. I hope you've got some water handy. What did the foster parents want or need most? Oh, I asked you that one. Sorry. Okay. What was the age range of the kids and teens who the foster parents were raising? And did you notice any difference in how parents discussed their experiences based on the age of the child?
So the youngest child, I believe, that was discussed was 12. And the oldest, I think, was 17. So really in that adolescence phase. So a lot of it was pretty similar. They were, you know, either in middle school or high school, dealing with starting relationships with others. So pretty much, I would say the topics that we covered were similar.
Are there any outside nonprofits or organizations that offer a sort of ally training specific to foster parents?
Yes, and I can pull those up right now. So, in the chat so everybody can have it. So the Get Real Center for the Study of Social Policy does a lot to promote these types of trainings. Pretty much they are more focused, again, for staff, but they do want to branch out to do more foster parenting type of trainings. And then also another one through the Human Rights Campaign, the Celebrating Everyday Change Makers. That's another good site to reach out to if you want more information about trainings you can do.
Okay, we've got two more for you.
Okay.
What would you say to foster parents who are religiously opposed to the LGBT lifestyle and don't know how to share their beliefs with their foster kids in a non-controlling, appropriate way? It's a big one.
Okay, so for that one, I would really say that unfortunately, if you are religiously opposed to the LGBTQ lifestyle, that's gonna be controlling. And something I would recommend is if you're someone who has those beliefs, but you still want to support your child, that's a really good sign, first of all. And something I would suggest is to look into the research again on what providing an affirming household versus a non-affirming household is going to do to your child. Because if ultimately what you care about is the health and safety of your child, the research shows that even just providing a little bit of affirming care to them is really going to reduce their chances of suicide, reduce their chances of depression and self-harm, which has like a direct impact on whether your child is going to be on this earth or not. So I would say that would be a good place to start, because it kind of stresses the importance of just a little bit of care can do for a child.
You have one more from a professor, but I'm going to sneak my question in. Some friends of ours adopted two kids out of a group home situation. And so what implications, if any, do you think your research will have on children who actually never get into foster care, into a home placement, but are instead in group home placements?
Yeah, that's definitely going to come into effect, because LGBTQ children are actually much less likely to be placed in a home setting as opposed to a group home. They pretty much are deemed by the system as, oh, you're gay, you got to go to a group home. No family's going to take you, which is awful in and of itself. But yeah, the reality is a lot of these kids are never going to see a permanent housing situation. So I definitely think this is something that can be adapted as well to the people who run these group homes, because they're going to be dealing with a lot more kids. The chances of this being something that impacts them is, in my opinion, pretty much near 100%. They're going to have LGBTQ children in their home. So they really need the training more than anybody.
And the last question is, I know you said your findings were common sense, but did you have any surprises?
I did. So part of my little description I sent out to the foster parents is, if you've provided affirming care to an LGBTQ child for over a year, hit me up and we can talk. And I had a parent reach out to me, and it was interesting because one second they would be saying something where I'm like, wow, yes, that is so great. You know, you're supporting your child, no double standards. And then the next moment they're saying something where I'm like, oh, that's so interesting that you would think that. Just some really some myths about why people are gay, and this, that, and the other. So it was definitely interesting seeing people's perspective of what they consider affirming. I feel like she had the spirit, but maybe it was just a little misguided. So a perfect example of why I think these trainings would be so beneficial. But she was definitely an interesting person to talk to.
And we have 1 minute and one more question, but I'm confident you can do it. Do you have any suggestions for creating an affirming environment for younger LGBTQ kids before they may even understand their own sexuality?
Yes, I think the thing that's most important when you're dealing with younger children is challenging the way in which you present gender norms. Even before kids are born, we're like, oh, are they going to be a boy or a girl? Are they going to be a little heartbreaker? You know, if a little boy expresses any sort of affection toward a woman, people are like, oh, look at him. He's, you know, such a man. He already wants his ladies. And it's just sort of reinforcing this idea of heterosexuality is the only option. And I think when we remove that sort of pressure on children, it'll allow them to more freely understand, like, I like boys, I like girls, I like, you know, whatever, and that's okay. They don't have to fit in the box.
Thank you for fielding all those questions for us. We're going to do a round of applause for Elliot. Thank you so much for sharing your work and your time with us this afternoon. And I hope you have a from our house to yours.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks.